Welcome back. In the first video of this series, we discussed how men being in community with other men used to be the way of the world, and that the Renaissance of men exists as a call to adventure back to that way of being. In the second video, we talked about that call to adventure as a journey to masculinity, and that masculinity is the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility. We talked about how we as men must undertake that journey with heart, which lies at the center of us, and even in the depth of our feelings of isolation, art can speak to our center. Because great works of art represent timeless encapsulations of beauty beyond language that we can carry with us. We have a massive legacy of beauty to support us on our quest towards becoming men. In this video, we're going to challenge the false god of isolation head on, and I'm going to show you how you can slay that false god with the power of your mind, heart, and body. Are you ready? Let's get started. Now, I'm going to say something a little challenging. Isolation is a myth. It's a self-created prison. We live on a planet of 8 billion people. I live in a city of 4 million people. Even my apartment building has hundreds of people in it. To think that I'm isolated when I'm surrounded by people all the time is a belief, and there's one word written on the bars of our self-created prison: fear. And that's okay. I need to stress that. Your fear is welcome. It can have a seat at the table with you and me together. So let's pull out some chairs and talk. Isolation is caused by fear. But fear of what? Fear of what people will think. What will so-and-so think if I do or say X? Let me tell you a little secret though. Very, very few people are thinking about you in that way. You know how you know? Because are you thinking about them or are you thinking about yourself? If you're anything like me, most of the time, you're thinking about yourself. Wait a second. Anyway, I guarantee you that others are thinking of themselves too. In fact, no matter how calm, cool, and aloof a man might seem, he's probably as concerned about what others think of him as you are about what others think of you. And I'd like to share a painting which illustrates this concept. The painting is Landscape with the Fall of Icarus by Peter Bruegel the Elder. It was painted in 1560, which not coincidentally was during the height of the Italian Renaissance, and it's currently hanging in the Royal Museums of Fine Arts of Belgium and Brussels. So if you're just listening to this, you'll maybe want to stop and pull up a copy of the painting so you can see what I'm talking about. And there's a link in the description. Now, I'm no fine arts expert, but I'm going to describe for you what I see. It's a landscape painting which looks out over a wide turquoise bay from atop a cliff. In the foreground, a farmer with his back to the viewer tills the soil using a plow drawn by a horse. Past him in the distance, the bay extends to the horizon. A city or small town lies along the coast in the background, shadowed by steep mountains, and a castle rises out of the stony shores on the opposite side of the bay. There are islands in the bay, one of which is inhabited with red-topped roofs like the town. Sailing ships lean with the wind on the water, including majestic galleons with their sails full and the background near and far. A pale golden sun sets far beyond them. Returning to the foreground, just beneath the plowman in perspective, stands a shepherd. His sheep graze beside him. A loyal dog sits at his side. The shepherd's eyes look skyward. And as we follow the eye line created by the sheep down to the water, we see poking out from the waves, not in any particularly noticeable part of the painting, a small pair of vertical legs with a scattering of feathers. Icarus has just crashed down in the water on an otherwise lovely day. This great disaster, which has echoed down through the ages, was just another day in the life for everyone around. No one noticed. They're thinking about their own concerns. The plowman works his plow. The shepherd ponders the sky. Ships sail, sheep graze, and life goes on as the sun sets. In the last episode of this series, I talked about poetry as a portable art form. And now I'd like to read you a section of a poem called Musée des Beaux-Arts by the British-American poet W.H. Auden. Auden wrote, quote, "And Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on." Even at the fall of Icarus, this great legend, Everyone continued thinking about themselves and their own lives, not him. In the same way, as catastrophic as your social faux pas might seem, moments later, people will just be going on with their lives like they were with Icarus. People have somewhere to get to, and they'll sail calmly on. Now you might say, that just reinforces my aloneness. People aren't thinking bad things about me, they're not thinking about me at all. Well, believe it or not, this is a good thing. Would you rather start painting on a mud streak canvas, no pun intended, or a blank one? I'd rather have a blank one. So, how to go about painting on that canvas? Men usually do it in one of two ways. Option one is we diminish ourselves, to be reserved and humble. We say, I don't want to take up space, maybe if I'm quiet and polite, someone will notice me in the way that I want. Now, there are some advantages to this in certain circumstances. Sometimes humble silence is very much required. But unfortunately, as you probably know, and as I've learned throughout my life, that rarely works in the way we want. Option two, which many men choose, is to puff ourselves up, take up space, and try to impress people. I have my own reactions to this style of being, but the hard truth is that it's undoubtedly effective in some circumstances. However, not only can it be used for compensation, it can be taxing on other people. I will make you notice me the way that I want. Bro, I get it, but man, dial it back. Now, between diminishing ourselves and puffing ourselves up, there's a third option: listening. There's a strange paradox of human conversation. The more you listen, the greater a conversationalist people will think you are. Now, this seems like a paradox until you realize that it's about listening, not just giving someone the opportunity to talk. Listening communicates groundedness and confidence that you're secure enough in yourself to give space to others, while also expressing a deep and sincere humility and concern for other people at the same time. So what is listening? Listening is not about what you do with your ears. Your ears hear. You as a person listen with your mind, heart, and body. Let's start with the mind. Now, we have to keep our minds from wandering when we listen, but our minds can take in information faster by reading than we can by listening. If you listen to podcasts or even this video at 1.2x speed or faster, that's why. We can't do that in person though, so our ability to hold focus is important. The second thing we have to do is to withhold judgment. This is crucial. People can feel when they're being judged. If you can do just these two things, hold focus and withhold judgment, you can listen to anyone, because everyone, like you, longs to be understood. The second part of ourselves that we listen with is our heart. Listening is not just what you think about what someone is saying, but how you feel about it as well. So allow yourself to feel. This is also a chance to show true empathy, which is trying to imagine how you would feel if you were in the other person's shoes. It's also a chance to practice truth-telling discernment. What does your heart tell you about what the person is saying? Is it true? The third part of ourselves that we listen with is our body. One way we do this is through mirroring or changing our posture to match the speaker. But you've also listened with your body in other ways. Have you ever been so engaged in conversation that time disappeared? Like on a first date. Suddenly it's midnight and the waiter's turning on the lights and checking his watch. That process of being totally in sync with the other person was you listening with your body. We often call this a deeply meaningful experience. It's an odd paradox that sometimes the more embodied an experience is, the more meaningful we call it. That sunrise you watched from the mountaintop wasn't more meaningful than it would have been from the valley. The difference is that you used your body to get there. In the same way, the more deeply you listen, the more powerful an experience that you can achieve for both you and the speaker. Now, who can you do this for? Everyone. In fact, what if you lived this way? Every conversation as an opportunity to stimulate your mind, open your heart, and even have a meaningful experience. Yes, even with your boss, with your neighbor, or the random person in line at the checkout next to you. Can you see how this might give you the experience of no longer being alone? Now, I've been doing this for years, and regularly I have complete strangers tell me some of the most personal details about themselves. At an airport in the United States, a woman told me about how she had to call the SWAT team to rescue her and her son once. A tour guide in India took me to a local Indian bar after we had spent the day together, and he almost got in a fight because he wasn't supposed to bring tourists there. And do you remember the Moroccan hammam story from episode 1? All of these doors opened not because I'm particularly wealthy, high status, or handsome, but because I listened, which said I was trustworthy and let people open up their hearts and lives to a stranger. And we both felt less alone in the process. Now, this taught me something important. By giving, we receive. We see that our experiences as human beings are shared. Maybe not one-to-one, but we can see how our experiences of heartbreak, disappointment, frustration, anguish, pleasure, victory, and joy have so much in common. You have your story, and I guarantee you, the person seated next to you on the plane, or on the bus, or in the theater has theirs. Men too, trust me on that. Even the most stoic man has precious memories to share. We all feel isolated. Everyone wants to be heard, and no one has the chance to. In fact, there's an old African proverb, when a person dies, a library burns. You know that feeling, right? So much inside you to give, and that's true for everyone. So, listening is a gift that solves several problems at once. First, it proves that isolation is a myth. We're so much closer to each other than we realize. Many of our most significant stories are just beneath the surface. Second, it means you don't have to worry about what people think of you. You're giving people space to think of themselves in a new way. Third, it brings the world a little closer together. Fourth, you learn about life and people, even if it's just things you'd prefer not to imitate. And fifth, it gives you something too, possibly even a meaningful experience. In fact, if you do this, people will apologize for talking. They'll feel insecure for taking up the space that you give them. But the chance for people to share their true selves is how you make friends. The kind of friends you want to have anyway. People who are open and have interesting things to say, and who think deeply about their lives. Those are the kind of friends that I want to have anyway. Now I get to put this into practice in my podcast every week. My episodes run very long, sometimes 3 to 4 hours. In fact, my top downloaded podcast of all time is almost 5 hours long. How do the conversations stay afloat? Because I'm listening and giving people a chance to share their stories. I'm not special. I choose to be this way, and you can too. Now, I can already hear some objections forming in people's minds about how they can't do this. But do you remember how I said that isolation is a prison, and written on the bars is the word fear? I encourage you to challenge yourself. Are these actual objections, or is it fear wearing a mask? But let's entertain a couple of them. First, you might say maybe there's no one in your immediate environment. There's no one in my life but blue-haired lesbians that I hate. Well, if you really think that, then there's nothing I can do to help you, because it's objectively not true. You have parents, you have old friends you haven't talked to in years, you have neighbors, and even the little old lady on the bus. Listening doesn't have to be an evening-long commitment. It can take 5 minutes and then graciously excuse yourself. The point is not to have one conversation to rule them all, but practicing the art of listening for when you really need it, like on a date. Second, maybe you don't know how to start a conversation with a stranger, but everyday life in public affords us countless opportunities for generosity. Whether it's holding a door, letting someone cut in line at a queue, giving them the last cookie on the counter, or whatever. I bet if you spent a day in a coffee shop, you could give of yourself countless times, even if it's just a smile and the question, "Hey, what are you reading?" And I also hear that I'm an American and proud of it. We're very sociable and outgoing people, but I've been to a few countries in Europe and I get that it's different. But if you'd like to criticize Americans for being too forward, I could level equal criticism back at Europeans for not being forward enough. Our culture is only our character if we let it be. Now, traveling has certainly helped me refine down many of the rough edges of my Americanness, believe it or not. It's why I succeeded when I traveled. So hopefully this video and my encouragement might help many of you Europeans cultivate a bit more rough edges in return. Because we all have something to learn from each other as men, right? Are you starting to see that you might be less alone than you thought, and that aloneness might be self-imposed because of the lie of fear? Whatever failure Icarus experienced was just another day in the life of the world around him. So what's holding you back? Because opportunities for connection are all around you. Every conversation is a chance at connection, even if only for a moment. It's a gift to both you and them. And if you'd like to hear an example of this kind of listening in action, I've included a link in the show notes to a podcast I did with my friend, Brendan Schmidt, who you can find on Instagram at Masculine Revival. This was one of his first podcasts and was early in my career. Just check out the first 45 minutes or so, and I hope you'll hear what it means to give a man space to speak, and what both participants can gain in the process. And I hope this video encourages you to look for a chance to listen, maybe just a few minutes from now. Don't worry about the questions or what you'll say. Give the gift of yourself, your mind, your heart, and your body, and trust yourself. The answers will be there. In the next video, we'll talk about what it means to give that gift of listening, not just to others, but to yourself. I hope to see you then.